Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Thriving Adoptees podcast. So today I'm delighted to be joined by Anne. Anne, welcome to the show. And I am really looking forward to this stuff because I figured that I'm going to be learning a lot alongside our listeners because, you know, I think it says advocate on my bio on some of my social media. But I feel like I'm probably at beginner level, and you know, like you're like a black belt advocate.
I love that. Yeah.
You've done a lot more of this stuff, so I'm really fascinated to hear more about your what do we say we're going to call it? Your advocacy journey. But welcome to the show. Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much for having me, Simon. No, that's incredibly kind of you to say. Black belt in the field is awesome. I'm only 23 for the audience members who may not know me, which is probably a bit far-fetched. I'm all the way over in New South Wales, Australia. So love my advocacy journey. Super excited to be here with you today, Simon. And I hope I can teach you and your listeners a little bit of something and get something back as well, like I always do.
Yeah. So we were the key word that I got so excited about when we were chatting before the podcast was the word realization. So, you know, I see the podcast as hopefully like a catalyst for more realizations. We live in a world where everybody's obsessed by hacks or strategies or techniques, when, as we've been discussing, the real juice, the real power, the power behind the throne of change in my world is realizations. And so that's what we're trying to do. It's like I'm trying to mine your mind for your realizations, share them with our audience in the hope that that will catalyze some realizations in them, and they will see how they can become a better advocate for themselves, or if they're an adoptee, or they can become somebody that is able, if they're adoptive parent, how they can become a better a better advocate for their child, and how they can help their child become a better advocate for themselves. That's why I went with the. That's when I was trying to glue the different bits of the stuff together for, you know, putting together realization, advocacy, story, empowerment, and stuff like that. Does that makes perfect sense to me? But
makes perfect sense to me. No, absolutely. And like, you're very aware of my story, Simon. So you're aware of, you know, this idea of becoming oneself through epiphanies and through highlighted experiences that aren't necessarily through, you know, years of working in one field or years of being in one, you know, logical education or something like that. It is through those little moments, and those little moments where you're able to take back a step and have a realization where you're like, whoa, this is my life, or this is how I'm going to process this, or this is how I'm going to further my situation in this moment. And it really is just based on those, you know, few moments that turn into epiphanies. And it can sometimes be a bit of a process getting to that epiphany. You can be kind of in the wrong space for a little while before you come to the realization that is important. But I truly believe in the philosophy that you're putting out there, that epiphanies and realization is really the key to changing your life in situations where you might think that you're not going to change your life, or you might not think that you're going to have that happy thought one day or that life-changing thought. But I think if more people took notice to those little realizations or epiphanies that they have and feel it in their gut feelings, they'll be able to kind of prosper towards that higher purpose that their instinct is clearly trying to get them to work towards, you know.
Wow. Yeah. Have you heard of epiphanettes?
No, what's an epiphanette?
It's just a little epiphany.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
A little epiphany. I like that.
Yeah.
So like less happy chemicals when you have it, or like a smaller realization.
Well, it's really the cure for epiphany envy.
Oh,
Yeah.
yes.
So you can go on a course with somebody, like you can be on a course with somebody, like I could be on a course with somebody, and they're getting everything.
Yep.
And you just think, I wish I could be getting what they're getting. Yep. So, you can have an epiphany, or you can have, a shift in perspective, or you can have an epiphanet or an insightlet, and it's really a way to be more inclusive about the shifts in realizations that rock our worlds, or just nudge them a little bit, and it makes it less. Have you heard of a guy called Charlton Heston? It's like an American actor from years ago.
Yeah, I have. Yep.
So he talks, he has these, he was in a lot of religious, and El Cid is a big movie from the 60s. So I've got you 20, you're 23, I'm 54. So that's 31 years on it. Yeah. So like you have these huge moments, one of my mentors, Charlton Heston, Holy Mother of, and then all that, the different words that come after that. But this is a family show, and we sort of like we see those, we see people having those, and we think, I wish I could have one of those. I'm not getting it. So an insightlet is probably like a small insight, a bit bigger, a bit smaller than an epiphanet, and it's really just a way of being a bit more patient and hanging out at the bus stop for insights.
Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting. We're talking a lot of literary references here. So do you know the play Waiting for Godot?
I've heard of it, yeah.
Yeah, very interesting. Not very interesting in the sense that it has a hugely interesting plot line. It's just two people waiting at, whatever you want to perceive it as, really. And then just talking about the wait, And I think in that play in particular, you see them come to a lot of epiphanies and small realizations and epiphanets in that moment of waiting. And I wonder about the idea that people have epiphany envy. Does that come with inability to be patient and wait? And, maybe this community that we're living in now with, technologies and social media and instant gratification and reward immediately, maybe we're having less epiphanies and realizations because of our inability to just sit and be and have our mind go through those thoughts and that process to come to that powerful moment. What do you reckon, Simon? Is that possible? Are we blocking our epiphanies?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't think anyone's going to disagree with this, is it? It's a patient game. None of us are made to wait anymore. So what are we made to think about except what's happening directly in front of us?
Yeah, definitely. So can you share a little bit about your story, Emma?
Absolutely. So I'm a 23-year-old woman, Te Arawa woman. I'm born in Australia, but my family ancestry is from New Zealand. Very rich family history there. I love my identity and culture. So huge recognition to my cousins and family in New Zealand. I have a 6-year-old son who I absolutely adore. Had him at a very young age and graduated school, all of that fun stuff. I also look after my 2 teenage sisters. They're dependent on me as well. So a very full home. My heart is very full every day. But ultimately, I'm an advocate through and through. I grew up in the foster care system. So in Australia, there's currently 46,000 Australian children living in out-of-home care. And nearly 70% of those kids have been in care for 2 years or more. And I was in care for 7 years of my life. So from the age of 9 until I had my son when I went independent. And from those experiences, I graduated school, but I started to really kind of want to use my voice. I started working in the community services industry, saw I didn't really like it that much. I didn't like how young people were being treated, and it made me really self-conscious on my own abilities to be a person larger than my stigmas, because I saw my colleagues who were equal to me acting lesser on what I would consider was my personal situation anyway. So I completely rerouted my life and went into the advocacy field, started doing it locally. And then I've moved I do group, individual and systematic advocacy in Australia, all around. So I work with young people, having conversations, doing surveys, a lot of self-help stuff with them, as well as doing a lot of policy and procedure with Parliament, with people associated with Parliament, with organisations associated with looking at that policy and that data for young people in Australia, because ultimately I focus on homelessness for young people transitioning from 18 years into independence, because 30% of young people leaving state care end up homeless within their first couple of years. And it's a really deteriorating number that I'm very unhappy with. So that's my main focus, Simon. I am an advocate through and through. I'll be doing this my whole life. I have no interest in changing my fields. I work 4 jobs and all of them are associated with advocating for young people in vulnerable states, vulnerable situations, not necessarily out of home care, but really any of those situations that leaves a young person vulnerable. So love what I do.
Yeah. Well, there's quite a lot there.
Yeah, very much so.
To put it mildly. Mm-hmm. So this came from a place of dissatisfaction, outrage, desire to change the system.
Oh, yeah.
Or, what?
Outrage, absolute rage, Simon. I was a very angry young woman. Like, you could probably picture me. A lot of you as listeners would probably even stereotype me as a young person growing up in the system. I was the older sister of 3 younger sisters, and we were put in a situation where I was the mother and I continued to be the mother. So this idea of being an advocate for yourself kind of was consistent throughout my life from the very get-go. Like, I've always had to kind of do that. It hasn't changed. It literally is the course of my life. So finding my voice and being able to hold on to that was a huge thing for me. But through high school, it was me using my voice in such an angry and intimidating way because I didn't know how to structure my emotions to rational thoughts. And we talk about like CBT and EDT therapies, like cognitive behavioral therapies, and that idea of rationalizing emotions. And as a young person that had gone through trauma, my emotions weren't rationalized. I was just living in this constant state of anger, or secondary anyways to what I'd been through, which was just disappointment. I was so disappointed in my situation that when I started seeing that in my residential care situation, which was where I was working, I was like, whoa, this is actually bringing back some really hard memories of me feeling not valued. And that made me angry again. So, you have aggression as a teenager, which feels quite normal. A lot of like young people go through phases where they're angry or they're really upset, and we take that down to a lot of hormones. And I was pregnant around the same time that a lot of these hormones are huge things, and this aggression and emotions are huge. So a lot of people brought it down to those types of things, when really it was like a response to how I'd been treated my whole life. So when I started reworking on that, I started looking at anger as less of a tool and more of something that I'd been through. I was an angry person, that's okay. And started using that as like, I could be angry, I have been angry, but angry isn't going to get me the success that I want in this system. It's not going to make change. I wasn't looking at for personal success at all. I was looking at making some sort of small significant change to my community that would make me feel like I was valued no matter what situation I was growing up in. Because when I was 18, I did not feel valued in that area at all. I didn't feel valued in the community services sector. And now I can say safely at 23, I'm no longer angry, I'm more passionate. That passion may have been motivated once upon a time by deep aggression and anger, but now it's purely passion. And I love what I do, not because I know that it needs to change, but I love what I do because I know that it is changing, and I know that I'm part of that working wheel and I'm part of that process. And I think once I was able to change my anger and put it into like a motivation and reroute what that energy was, that's when I started producing passion and started producing what I really wanted to do.
Okay. Was there a particular moment, like a tipping point, where your anger became passion, or you realised that your anger wasn't getting anywhere, or
Oh,
we
absolutely.
talked about realizations, right? So
yeah, and this really ties in as well with something that I really want to bring up with you, Simon, which is like this idea of advocacy burnout. And we're talking about realizations coming from a process, and you have a realization suddenly, but ultimately you have to think about that thing once or twice before to have that big thought about it. And the advocacy moment for me, where I was like, well, I can't be angry about this anymore. I have to change my ideas about it. I have to change my feelings towards what I'm doing. I can't just do it out of a state of aggression. Was a very historical time for me in 2019 when I did 3 major conferences in 3 days in 3 different states. And yeah, it was huge for me, Simon. I live in Armidale, a small rural town in New South Wales. I was working a reception job and I drove 6 hours to Queensland and did a face-to-face conference of about 500 people. Drove back to Armidale, worked one of my normal reception shifts, drove to Sydney, did a conference of like 38 people, flew to Melbourne, did 3 days of conferencing, 3 different occasions, 3 different audiences, and drove back. And in that moment, when I was back home, finally in my lounge room with my people, the people I love, adored, cared for, was finally in my safe and secure environment, I realized how undervalued I felt personally. Not by the people that were loving me, because I know how loved and cared for I was by the people in this room, but I felt undervalued completely because for the last 3 days, I'd been the superstar. And, I very often get referenced as superstar, which I love. I'm very much a superstar in my field. You call me a black belt in my industry. Like, that is a beautiful feeling to someone who's 23 and once felt so stereotyped and stigmatized in this industry. So I do love feeling as though, that I'm that gold shiny new toy in the playground sometimes. But when you come back to your ordinary life, it's kind of like being an A-star celebrity and then going back to, the regularities, the norms. It was super under depreciated. It didn't feel good. I felt awful. And that was a personal thing. I knew that was nobody else's fault. I felt very lonely in that moment because I couldn't say, why aren't you giving me a gold medal for the things that I've done? Because I'd been paid. I'd been recognized. I'd been debriefed. And I went home and my family said, how was it? Did you have fun? What did you get up to? Very normal, usual conversations. But I personally, it wasn't enough. And that was when I had to start doing the work. I was like, I can't fuel myself purely off aggression anymore. Because when I do, anger is the only thing that will continue to fuel me. If I'm angry about being undervalued or underappreciated, personally, I'm going to continue being angry about that. I'm going to continue being angry about the statistics. I'm going to continue being angry about the fact that I have to do this job because nothing changes. And I'm going to continue to be angry at my family and my community and my close circle for not putting me on the pedestal that other people put me on. And so a lot of it was reworking my own ideologies about myself. I can, push myself to succeed, but that success rate is only measured by myself. I shouldn't be putting it out there in the world to be measured by other people's remarks or comments about me. Instead, it's based off of how good I feel doing this, like this podcast, for example. It's 10 o'clock at night, my time, when we started this, but this fuels me, Simon. This is conversation that I enjoy having because of what we're talking about is the realizations, the epiphanies that you come to when you speak to people openly about your situation and about what you went through to be able to change your mentality and change your ideology into something that was healthy for you rather than hindering. And anger was hindering me at that point. I couldn't reward myself on the inside if I was angry at what I was doing. So I became proud instead.
As simple as that.
As simple as that. Became proud, became passionate. It was a big thing.
It does. Life does become simpler when we have these big insights, I think.
It does. When you start putting the and it's like it sounds cliched, but when you do start putting the value of other people's opinions onto your bedside table and it's the first thing you look at in the morning, which a lot of people are habitual for doing at the moment, again, with social media and this idea of instant reward and gratification. And I think a lot of it harms us in the way that if you can't give yourself that gratification, how long are you going to continue looking for it until you just get angry or sad? Like, is somebody going to build their own gratification, or does it have to be taught, or is it something that you come to a realization to, like I did, where I was like, hang on, I need to have some self-compassion here because no one else is going to be compassionate to me.
Yeah. Couple of different ways I could go off the back of that. I'm going to go with the first thing that came to my mind. So I've talked about this on another podcast, but I don't know, we talked about it. But it's straight into what you just said, I think. So I saw a video, and the video, it was vox pops, like it's like people interviewing.
Yeah.
People being interviewed on the street about their views of adoptees. And then they were played back they were played back to these teen adoptees, and the teen adoptees kind of focused in on some of the negative perspectives that the people that had been interviewed shared, right? And the question, and I felt quite angry watching this, and then I realized what it was. It was the fact that nobody seemed to question them on camera. And the idea that came into my head was, if the mentor that was working with these teens, did the mentor that was working on these teens point out that to the teens, if they're waiting for society's view of teens, of adoptees, to change before they can be happy, they're going to be waiting a very long time?
Oh yeah, it's a huge thing. Habits. Habits, Simon. When you start putting off your own habits, your own happiness due to habits, you end up putting off your own successes. So, and we see people doing it all the time with their weight loss journeys, right? They're like, I'll be happy when I'm 20 kilos lighter. I'll be happy when I'm 30 kilos lighter. And they get to that point and they've missed the whole journey. And I think that's part of, again, that realization that I had in the advocacy field was, I can be angry that the statistics aren't changing, but is that going to help me be happy with helping the statistics change? No, it's about falling in love with the opportunities that I get to be part of this working wheel and part of this process, because you can't put off your own happiness just to the completion of successes, because otherwise the path to that success doesn't become fun. It doesn't become a journey. It becomes something that's strenuous and upsetting until you reach that peak moment of happiness. It's something I see very, very often in young people and even in adults. It's really not just something that we can put in a young person box, because people put off their happiness all the time to the end result.
Yeah. I mean, we're all conditioned into this myth of I'll be happy when.
Yep, absolutely. And I know it's probably very interesting for our listeners who, may have these gaps in like ideas about themselves, and like we've been talking about with like identity as well. I know for myself, when I started venturing into my cultural history, which I appreciate everybody keeping up with my language and me attempting to speak my native language, because it's actually quite unknown to me. And, I very seldomly started looking up my family history out of curiosity as to whether or not my father's ramblings as a child were real or not. And then it ended up actually sparking like a form of happiness in me with the process. I started getting really happy every time I'd find new information or I'd look up new information. And it wasn't like I could find all the information. You know, it's not like once I found my whole family tree, I was happy. It was finding each individual person on that family tree made some part of me feel connected to something higher or something else. And that's what started bringing on happiness. So, you know, it's absolutely possible to do naturally, to fall in love with each process or each habit that you're working towards to achieve a larger goal. But when we talk about these ideas of goals and these ideas of dreams, it really kind of takes away the privilege we get in working towards those types of things. Because ultimately, if you have a dream or you have a goal and you're working towards that, that's something that you should be proud of. Every single step that you take towards that goal should be something that you should be proud and happy with. I get told very often by psychologists and doctors and teachers, and they go, Emily, you could stop tomorrow and you'd be proud of yourself for 50 years. And it's true. I could end my career tomorrow. I wouldn't retire on a very wealthy superannuation or anything at 23, but I would be happy with my achievements because I've done a lot and I feel very happy with that. And it's not something that as an advocate, I go, you know, I'll be happy when I change one policy, or I'll be happy when I finally get into, you know, the office or something like that. It's falling in love with being part of this process. I'm very grateful for my lived experience because it allows me to be able to grow with a system that often doesn't grow or often has a lot of anger and resentment towards it. And I'm very happy to be the bubbly spark that is kind of bouncing around the community services sector in Australia, because I feel like it's healthy.
Yeah.
Hmm.
So trying to crystallize this really and ask, because I can see lots of little light bulb moments, and I'm hoping that is, and they are setting off any light bulbs for the listener. For me, this whole thing is like how I'm trying to gel this to the kind of the adoption vibe, right? So I'll be happy when somebody accepts me. I'll be happy when somebody loves me. I'll be happy when my child loves me. I'll be happy when I get my child into the school that I want them to get into. I'll be happy when the teacher takes my child's ADHD diagnosis. I'll be happy if I'm an adoptee. I'll be happy when I'm reunited with my birth mum. I'll be happy when, I'll be happy when. So I'm encouraging you to think about, I'm encouraging you, dear listener, to think about when are you putting your happiness on hold? And the thing that popped into my head is that, and I had, feelings are an inside job, right?
Absolutely.
And I joke about this, right? I pick a light subject to talk about this stuff. So, you know, you talking about rain and the east coast of Australia is having like a once in 100-year deluge, right? So I was joking to somebody about this on a podcast yesterday, and I did it in such a way, I don't know, but like have you got miserable weather over there? Do you have miserable weather?
Oh yeah, miserable.
So how does the rain make us miserable? Have we ever been? Sorry?
Yeah. Oh, why do we connotate it with miserable and the sun with happiness type of thing?
Yeah, and you know, the weather's really gloomy. And this stuff is like so we are brought up in a world that believes that we have to put our happiness on hold. I'll be happy when.
Yep, even for
I'll
weather.
be happy when.
I'll be happy when the sun's out tomorrow.
I'll be happy when the sun's out.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
we're brought up on that, and it's so nuts that when we start to think about it. So I'll be swimming. I'll be going swimming in a while, and I once said to the lady on reception, "How are you doing?" And she said, "Yeah, I'm as good as the weather." And I said, "What?
What?
How does that,
yeah.
How does that work?" But this is like old Simon.
It's
talking
a real
about
thing.
CBT. No, I'm talking about the fact that feelings come from inside us.
Yeah, absolutely, and can absolutely be a reflection. Like it's interesting that you say that, because we talk about feelings being such a deep and emotional thing, but they can be swayed and changed on the simple basis of the weather. Like you can wake up in the morning having full intentions to have a sunny day, but as soon as the weather turns, and it doesn't even become a thing of not being able to do those activities because of weather change. It's that people, and I see it in my teenagers all the time, they'll be super excited for school, and then as soon as it's rainy weather in the morning, their whole mood changes. They're like, I don't want to go to school, I want to stay in bed. And it's like, why has the weather changed your sporadicness? Like, where has the kick in your step now? No, it hasn't. You're just allowing it to. It's
wow.
You're giving it an excuse almost for what you want to do.
Yeah. So here's where I'm going with this, right?
Yep.
Our feelings don't come from the world outside us. They're an inside job. They come from our thoughts. We have 70,000 of those a day. And most of us are obsessed with changing our feelings or changing our thoughts. But underneath all that, or doing all that, distracts us from who we truly are, like our identity. So if we're not feeling, like you can say, oh, well, so Simon's talking CBT here. He's saying, change your thought, and you'll change your feeling. And he's telling me to go to do CBT therapy. No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying, no, that's very distracting. It's going to take you nowhere.
Feeling.
It's going to take you nowhere. It's going to take you nowhere fast. Well, no, it's going to take you nowhere slow. We're all fixated on our feelings and our thoughts and our we're fixated on how our kids are behaving, how our kids are feeling, how our kids are thinking, and and all of our stuff as well. Where the answer is seeing who we truly are.
Yeah.
So who are we?
Who are we? We are a person based off of habits that we attend to each day, and those habits begin to create a personality, I believe. Or maybe it's the other way around. Who knows? Do we gain the personality and then create the habits? Is it a chicken and the egg type of thing? Which one comes first, our interests or how we play out those interests? No, I understand completely what you're saying. The idea of identity, I don't feel as though is a strong enough one in the community services sector. Like we have things like security, circle of security and things like that talk about belonging and cultural connection and things like that. But over here in Australia, we have some of the oldest land histories and oldest First Nation histories of a lot of other countries. And the statistics of our Indigenous youth in foster care and in out-of-home care situations is really large. And I do quite often a spiel to our Department of Community Justice sector over here about ancestry and about this idea of identity and belonging and being able to associate yourself with something other than just your personal lineage or your immediate lineage, and being able to take it kind of a step further in understanding your family history. And mine's very interesting in the idea that I can trace it back quite far to actually where it gets really mythical and kind of, yeah, you know what I'm talking about, Simon. Like you can trace your family ancestry back to where they don't know they don't know how this person was born, and it becomes really interesting to hear that from an adult view. Like I'm hearing that as an adult now, and heard those stories as a young child from my father, and they were like fairy tale stories from my father, so they didn't make parts of my personality. I wouldn't per se, I may be wrong being so young in that area, but now as an adult reading these stories, I feel such strong connections to my lineage, and it's kind of formed parts of my identity where I've allowed myself to be spiritual, or I've allowed myself to be open to wider understandings than just first family lineage. You know, I actually find myself asking people, who are your parents? Or tell me about your family ancestry, because I see a kick in people's step, or a bit of a gleam in their eye when they start to talk about the things that are personal to them and privy to them, but exude so much happiness and so much reward once spoken about. And in the advocacy sector that I work in with out of home care kids, you don't see that enough. You don't see that sparkle, that glimmer in their eye when you ask them, who's your mob? Who's your fam? You know, tell me about your identity. And instead it's a lot of questions. It's a lot of, or I know this is my aunt, or, you know, I know I'm from here, but it's not that truth or that deep fairy tale story, or which way your family lineage goes. A lot of people have very strong family lineage that they can trace back to kings and queens, and I'm sure very relatable to your audience. And it changed my life, and it's changing my young teenage sister's life as well, who did not have any association with my father, who is the Māori side of my family. So now, as an adult in our own home, I'm placing photographs of my abusive father around my home. I'm perfectly okay with it. I have no issues with my dad, except for what he's done, but I've come to terms with that. But my young sisters have never really met him or had anything to do with him. So I'm relaying happy stories to them and showing them photos of him, and they're starting to relate to his identity and starting to see parts of their identity come out that were really suppressed by my mother, who was constantly like, oh, you're acting like your father, you're acting like your father. And so now they're 14, 16 years old. I'm starting to see them go, oh, it's okay for those parts of me that were once deemed as bad because they were like my father, as being okay in Emily's home, because Emily understands that, yes, dad was an angry person, dad was this, dad was that, and we have parts of that DNA in us. That's okay. We'll deal with that. That's all right. But at least you can recognize where it comes from, and it's not being shut down. It's not being depersonalized. It's not being taken from you, which is a lot of what their childhood was no, you can't be that. Even though that's where you came from, that's the process that made you. You can't be part of that. And I personally was very lucky. Again, we talk about me being that angry teenage girl, and a lot of it stemmed from my dad being an incredibly angry, vicious, violent person. And because of that, I thought, if my dad's like that, I'm like that. And I felt it so deep rooted that I was bad and I was like my dad and I was like this, that it was kind of the complete opposite of my sisters, where I had to start researching my family history and finding those mystical stories and finding, the kings and queens and all of that family lineage, to go, there's more to my dad's side of the family than just this perception that I had as a child that he was a bad person. And that really helped me. It helped me finding my genealogy, and it helped me being accepted by my wider family. You know, I'm Australian born, but my family originate in New Zealand, and I have extremely strong family ties there. And I'm actually going through the process now of changing my last name, and it's given me huge cultural connections and huge confidence in being accepted, not just by myself, not just a self-acceptance for who I was born to or what my lineage is for my son, but an acceptance from my actual blood family, which is something astonishing sometimes for young people that haven't had those connections to family. I didn't have those connections. We were first born really Australian. So, you know, it's huge for me now to be able to recognize that and be recognized as well. My cousins talk to me as a cousin and recognize that I'm part of their blood lineage. And that is so special to me. And it really is something that helps me rationalize what it is that is my life. You know, we're not always happy with the circumstances of our life, but when you're able to go, I come from something way larger and way cooler than just that seed, it becomes way easier to live a life that's positive rather than negative, you know?
Yeah. Wow. We're talking about family, we're talking about homes, and that brings me on to that point that, you know, what's this Yes Vember thing that you...
Oh, Yes Vember, Simon. Well, look, Adopt Change is the absolutely fantastic organization that has hooked me up with having this conversation with you today. I am a brand ambassador with Adopt Change, and every year they turn Yes Vember into, every year they turn November into Yes Vember. And this is my second year being a part of the campaign. So this history stems from it being National Adoption Awareness Month in Australia. It started with National Adoption Awareness Week, which commenced in 2008 with our founder, Deborah Lee Furness. And it's been extended since then to a full month. So again, all about finding permanency for those young people in Australia. 46,000 of them, Simon, don't forget that number because it is huge. 46,000 young people in Australia looking for permanency. So that's foster care, that's residential care, emergency care, some in kinship placements with family that might not be long-term or permanent. So this year, we're doing a really exciting Yes Vember campaign. I have been dancing all across New South Wales for our Dance for Change challenge, which has been super exciting and super fun. We've had some amazing people like Angela Bishop and our fantastic choreographer Joel DeCartere doing a lot of that. We have a few different options for people that are wanting to support the campaign, because all proceeds do go to helping those 46,000 young people in care find permanency. We have paired up with Nicole Warren, who is an Australian designer, who has created really cool tote bags and hats for this year's home campaign, as well as our wear and share, which is the tote bags, the hats, and then we've had a formalized shirt done by AJE, which is a women's fashion brand in Australia as well, who have made a very niche Home for Every Child shirt, not just this year, but last year as well. So really exciting stuff. There's a few different ways that anybody can help young people in Australia this Yes Vember. We have our wear and share, as I was just talking to you about, Simon, with our messages on social media regarding what permanency looks like for you. So that might be very different, and I would really love to hear any of your listeners with their little story. So hashtag a home for every child if you'd like that. You can open your home and your heart and find out possibly more about being a carer in the UK and see if there's possible ways that you can support young people in your area, as well as donations to support our work. You can knit a blanket for our My Packs, or you can volunteer your time with our Changemaker team. So yeah, super exciting stuff, Simon. I'm very lucky to work with Adopt Change on a bunch of different projects, including feeling very, very special as a lived experience advocate in helping with the full process for Empower Change, which is a program that I'm a leave carer mentor for, which is a free online program for young people who are preparing for independence. So this was spoken about by me and a few other advocates that are around my age that have come from lived experience as well. And we just saw a few grey areas that we thought we could really highlight some niche and funky information on for young people in school. So really exciting program that I'm working with Empower Change, a lot of downloadable resources, and just working one-on-one with those young people that may potentially be going into a crisis space when they do become independent. Because again, Simon, those statistics are unfortunately against the young people in out-of-home care coming into independence and adulthood. So we really try to support them in every way possible with Adopt Change and our programs with Empower Change. And yes, Vember, which is such an exciting campaign every year. So yeah, I definitely would tell you all to check it out, just because you get to see some really cool funky dances, but also just for the messages that come across.
Those on Instagram.
The dances are so much fun. I'm loving it. I'm teaching it to all my young people, all the kids that come around. It's like, let's do this dance. Let's make a TikTok. So it is very exciting stuff. And again, this is my life work, Simon. So I'm really, really excited to have this conversation with you, experience more thoughts and realizations and epiphanies from these conversations, and even from your audience, and what might pop up further from here for them. So super, super excited.
Fantastic. Could you share some of the learnings that you know, obviously we all want to become better self-advocates. We want our kids to become better self-advocates. We want to advocate for our kids. That's what the listeners are tuning in for.
Absolutely.
I think the key thing is, turning when the anger became passion, it became a lot more powerful. Your advocacy clearly became a lot more powerful. And I'm highlighting that in case, just for some reason, anybody was missed that. Because obviously, when I'm listening to podcasts, I'm driving.
You're doing all sorts of things.
I'm doing stuff. And sometimes sometimes I miss the obvious lessons and I think I have to get back. But what are the principles would you like to share in terms of what you've learned that others may wish to learn to become better advocates?
Yeah, it's definitely a tricky question, because, like, as we stated, my process was definitely in that thought of anger doesn't serve me anymore. It's not a tool that I should have in this tool belt to be making changes, because it makes me wishy-washy. It doesn't stick me to my truth. And, some people might not struggle with aggression or struggle with being wishy-washy in moments of being angry. So what my advice really would look at your emotions, look at your behavior, look at what you're talking about, and see whether or not you're coming from a place of trauma sharing or if you're coming from a place of trauma sitting. And I think a lot of people sometimes will sit in their trauma spaces or sit with this idea of, it defining them, rather than moving outside that square and outside of that space into realizing, like I did, that aggression is part of this tool pack that I've got, and it might not necessarily serve me in this way anymore. And being kind to yourself in those moments of potentially going back on your truth, or feeling like a hypocrite, feeling like you're condescending yourself even, and know that there are places to build from that. I've definitely looked back on a lot of my thoughts and opinions over the last 5 to 7 years, and although none of them have changed so much that my truth or my morals differ, but it definitely has been moments where I've changed my whole perspective on things, or changed the way that I word things, because that's okay. It's all right to be like, oh, this was the information that I once had, and it's not necessarily reciprocal to me anymore. And I'm not going to continue pretending it is reciprocal to me just because that was the cause that I once fought for, or that was the feelings that I once felt so strongly about. Because Simon, for 10 years, I wanted to be a lawyer, and I could not think of anything worse right now than being a lawyer. But I told everyone that. I told everybody that I was going to be a lawyer. I went into early entry. I got into university. I told everyone I was going to be a barrister. And the one day that I told myself I wasn't going to do it anymore, I cried. I was like, how am I going to tell people that I don't want to do this anymore? Like, everybody knows me as Emily who wants to be a lawyer. And the first person I told didn't care. They're like, oh, okay, you're not going to go to uni. Okay, that's fine. No uni. What are you going to do? And I was like, gutted. I thought they were going to be like, what are you doing, Emily? That's being you. Like, it felt like my faith to me, but that was such a personal feeling. And it was in that moment I realized, oh my goodness, the emotions I've been feeling towards that, the joy and disappointment has been purely inside myself. And I shouldn't have felt like I was prejudging myself on other people's behalf, because that wasn't even happening. And since then, I've kind of been okay with changing my mind. Like, I told people last year that I wanted to Healthy Harold my business, and that's a bus in Australia, that goes around schools and does drug and alcohol safety classes and stuff. And he's got a giraffe puppet. And so I had this idea that I'd do my business in a van, and I'd start traveling and talking and advocating and motivational speaking, and absolutely still something that I really, really would like to do, but it no longer suits the life that I'm living with 2 teenagers, my 6-year-old, blah, blah, blah. And, it wasn't a devastating moment for me. And it also wasn't a moment where I would consistently lie to people and go, oh yeah, I'm still doing that. There's just this is an issue. It's being able to be there for your truth. You can bend towards your truth and you can change your truth, but it's sticking to it, realizing that your morals have changed, or realizing that your values have changed, and accepting that, not being guilty or angry at yourself for growing, which is really all we're doing once those opinions change, is changing, making a larger mind for ourselves, a bigger vocabulary. So really that would be my advice, is don't judge yourself. This is a very triggering experience for some, and I really urge you to take care of yourself. It's cliched again, the whole self-care thing that we're going with in this generation, but yeah, self-care, but really it's just kind of like, have a bit of compassion for yourself. Bit of self-compassion goes a long way. Talk to yourself as you would a good friend, because ultimately no one is harsher on themselves than yourself, and you shouldn't judge yourself so harshly for speaking your truth or going through lived experiences and wanting to become more because of that. So you absolutely can. It's entirely possible. I felt stigmatized for years, but that was me. It's part of how you think about yourself.
Okay. So I want to pull out some bits there.
Yes.
First off, if you're not getting what you want, then take a look at what you're doing.
Yeah.
And where
absolutely.
you're coming from. So that would be the first. So, and where you're coming from. So I heard something stunningly, simply superb the other week. Like, where are we coming from, or what are we going to? So are we coming from a place? Are we coming from a place of peace, love, and happiness? Or are we going to a place of peace, love, or happiness? So if we are angry now, and we're thinking that we're going to be less angry when, then we're going towards that peace. We're thinking, we're putting our happiness on hold, we're putting our peace of mind on hold, we're putting our self-care on hold, we're putting our self-esteem on hold. We're thinking, I'll be X when. I'll be X when all those kids have got a home.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that means that I can't be happy until the world has changed, which means I'm waiting for when. But if I'm coming
past your lifetime,
it's going to be
absolutely.
So that was the first thing that kind of came to me. So a question, for what, are you coming, what is it that you're working towards, and where are you coming from when you're working towards it? And the next thing that I wanted to talk about is getting in our own way. Right? Now, and this relates into self. Now, if we think about this really, really, really simply, and not metaphysically, just totally physically, I am getting in my own way. So Simon is walking along the street trying to get to the pub. And Simon is getting in his own way of getting to the pub.
Yep.
How is that possible? So the two Simons, we're not actually getting in our own way.
Yeah.
What's getting in our way is our conditioning, our habits, our habitual thoughts. It's not us. We are the thinker of the thoughts, not the thought.
Yep.
We are the one that hears the voice in our head, not
the creator.
Not the one, not the voice itself.
No. Yeah.
So we are not getting in our own way.
It's a formation of
that we have, a thought that we have picked up along the way is getting in our own way. And so if you're thinking to yourself, I'm getting in my own way, then respectfully, you're not. Because what's getting in your own way is a thought. And the process of a realization is that place where we bring the thought out into the light. We hold it in our hands, we switch the light on, and we look at that thought and we say, is that thought, it's like that, what's the lady, Byron Katie, is this true? Byron Katie, doing the work, Byron Katie, is this thought true? Is this serving me? It's like that. So you're not getting in your own way on your advocacy or anything that you're trying to do. You can't, it's impossible to get in your way because there's only one of you.
That's exactly
so what's getting in the way is the thought. And I wanted to kind of bring that in, really. Does that, because I'm trying to make it ultra simple, ultra precise,
no, that's exactly it. That's exactly it. Look, you define yourself by your morals, your ethics, and your values, but those things will change. And that's pretty much my underlying message. Your morals, your values, your ethics are three defining things, three defining umbrella terms for a bunch of thoughts, emotions, habitual, training that you've gone through, or whatever else your brain thinks about. But don't judge yourself for those things. Don't judge yourself for changing those things. You're right. The only person that will get in your way of being able to speak your truth is yourself. And your focus on that, and whether or not you do, like you said, are you going from a place of happiness, or are you coming from a place of happiness? And that's really highlighted for me, Simon. And I told you would do it. You'd give me some just beautiful one-liner like that will just stick with me for weeks. And it will be that, because ultimately there's only two ways, isn't there? You either come from the place of happiness, or that's where you're going towards. And I think that's what a lot of people who want to go through advocacy should focus on, is coming from a place of, you can make this change. Whether the change is just in yourself, a personal change, or you come to some personal realizations through this journey, that's enough. And if you do go on to change, massive things like policy and whatnot, it's about having self-compassion for yourself for getting there. You can be rewarded, you can feel rewarded, but ultimately that's you feeling those feelings. And if you're feeling disappointed about how far you've gotten or how hard you're working towards, I urge you to take a step back and think about what is actually rewarding yourself. And, you know, not think about that, because we all want to change the world. Yeah. But it's through me and through my deeper realizations and through me changing my own personality and my own thought patterns that I feel like I can change the world. And with that, I feel inspired every single day to make those steps towards doing it, no matter how hard it might feel or how long the hours are. It's about falling in love with that process of, I know that I am making conscious thoughts about my life each day when I work in this industry. And hopefully I'll get to change policy. I'd love to change a law one day, but really I could stop today and I'd be happy. I'd be very, very content, because I've done a lot of learning for myself. And I'd really urge anybody who feels as though they've been told they have a strong personality, or if, you know, you have very strong thoughts and feelings, to really look into what you could possibly do about those for your voice and for that advocacy aspect, because it really changed my whole perspective on myself, and not necessarily like my perspectives on the larger community. You know, I know what community services is, I know what laws are, but working in this industry really, really did change my inner thoughts on my ability to succeed in things. And those small successes were really highlighted as well. So that's something that I'd like people to take away. Advocacy is, you know, everyone wants to change the world in this game, but it's really about a process of, are you changing as a person? And if you're not, why? Because you're not perfect. No one's perfect. So if you're not growing and if you're not changing when you're trying to speak for people or on behalf of people, I ask you why, because nobody that you'd be advocating for would be thinking the same thoughts as you. So I'd really urge you to, you know, look at that and look at that deeper understanding of, am I changing? Am I valuable to myself? Do I feel valuable? Do I feel compassionate for myself? And if you're hitting all those marks, then you're going to feel fulfilled, no matter if you never change a policy or if you never feel like you change someone's life personally. So that's my understanding, Simon. That's what makes me feel fulfilled in what potentially could be a very draining industry for some. You know, it really is what you make of it when you work as an advocate, because it's very, very dredging sometimes. There's a lot of darkness in it, but it is about what you make of it and how you think about the situation.
Cool. I'm going to put some links into all the stuff that you were talking about earlier on.
Yes, so much.
And I'm searching for a one-liner that sums it all up.
You can be whatever you think you are.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or you can empower change as long as you're empowering change. Empowerment's an effort.
When the world changes inside, the outside world changes.
I like that. I like that way more than the last two things I just said. Absolutely. Yeah.
You've had, I've had the time to think about it, to put it in a little yeah. Oh, I didn't tell you this. I don't think I tell you this before. So because it sometimes takes me, I probably think slower than you do. I definitely speak slower than you do.
Oh yeah, I've got issues with that.
Maybe you would have been a good lawyer. I was thinking about that. She's just going to go and she's just going to be on her life is going to be 100%. It's just going to be arguments all the time. I don't think I'd like to be.
That was me. Yeah. That was me. I love to argue.
That's the angry stuff. So I was criticised for being too deep, and I couldn't come back. I couldn't come back with the response quick enough, and it didn't hit me till the following day. And the one I came back with, and I just wish I'd been able to say it at the time. I said, "Well, you'd prefer me to be more shallow.
Yeah, that's literally what I was thinking. I was like, would you prefer a shallow person? No.
Yeah.
Dark blues. It's a big color thing. That's a huge conversation. And again, like, we're going into the CBD space and things like that there when we start talking about colors. But yeah, really deep blues and the dark blacks are the deep colors. So when you start talking deep, people get so unnervy. It's not light anymore. It's not the energy they want. I love having deep conversations with you, Simon. This is this is cool, why we do it, right?
when you said self-care, I thought,
and that's why I try to steer
self-care is bubble bath, right?
Isn't it? Yeah, bubble bath, take the run. No, I use that word so loosely. Like, I use a lot of words very loosely because, you know, as human beings, we're confined by language, and even the English language is quite small in regards to some of the depth of things that you want to describe. So when I say self-care, you know, I mean just using common sense to take care of yourself, really, people. Like, if you feel like poop, make yourself feel better. And if you can't figure out how to make your endorphins or your dopamine or your oxytocin levels naturally higher, then you should probably see a doctor or, you know, talk to someone about, like, what are those natural ways to build dopamine and to build happiness, because yeah, you're gonna be in a real sad place otherwise. You can't just walk around mopey, sad, angry, and not do nothing about it, you know.
Yeah.
Gotta try.
We talk about the identity,
Mm.
And I think most of this time, most of us think we are the poop, but hidden inside that poop is a diamond. So
damn straight.
So look there.
Yep, look there. Absolutely.
I'm going to go for self-discovery over self-care.
Yeah, self-discovery. Nice.
Self-discovery. Let's dive in, you know, through, let's go through what we do. Let's go through how we feel. Let's go through how we think, to the essence of who we are.
Yeah, what makes us us. That. Yeah, absolutely. What makes you who you are every day? Like, you know, we're pretty cool. I think you're cool, Simon. I know you think I'm cool because we just like vibe love energy. Like, we love it here. This is absolutely key fun. So yeah, it's about finding that self-discovery and being able to be like, yeah, this is what makes me, and this makes me happy, so I'm going to keep doing it. And look, if it's a bubble bath, if that's your self-discovery, that's fine. Like, your bubble bath is awesome. But yeah, we're not going to like generalize that for the whole populace of people to say bubble bath will cure your sadness, because for some it just won't. It's about those habits. What do you enjoy? What makes you you?
According to the bubble bath manufacturers, it's going to make us happy. That's the thing. Is
and the rubber duckies.
All the advertisers know that we are feeling machines, and so they pull on our heartstrings with the feelings and so I'm going to bring this. I'm going to pose a question there. Self-care or self-discovery. What matters to you? And I'm going to sum up with my favorite quote, which I use quite a lot in terms of who we are. Well, we are spiritual beings having a human experience.
Absolutely. We absolutely are.
Thanks a lot, listeners, and thank you, Em. You've been
thank you so much.
See you soon.
See ya.